Disclaimer. At Two Addicts and a Moron, we discuss personal stories of addiction with the intention of being educational, relatable, and inspirational. The views and experiences shared are those of individuals involved, are not meant to glorify or condone any illegal or harmful behavior. This content is for educational purposes only and is not intended as professional advice. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction, we strongly encourage you seek help from a qualified professional or support service. Well, we are back.
Yes, sir.
Missed you.
Hey, I missed you too.
I know.
How
I
long
see
has
you
it
every
been?
day. Well, for our audience, it's only been a week, right? But sometimes we stage these in a way where we go a couple weeks without doing one. So we all get a little bit itchy whenever we don't get back in
Sometimes
the
we'll
room.
film two in a week and then take a week off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just depending on, my boy plays a lot of baseball and schedules and work.
It's a
And
full-time commitment in itself. How old is he?
16.
Yeah.
16, and it's a commitment for sure. So yeah, so when we get back in the room, in our room,
Yep.
we always get a little hype, a little pumped after
He used to
not
play
doing
for the
it for a while.
Yankees.
No shit.
No, you.
Me?
I know your
Cubs.
story.
Cubs.
Yeah.
All right.
You can tell that story here in a little bit.
Well, I want to learn about that, but what
It's
what
embarrassing even hearing about it. It's like,
Only he knows he played for.
oh my God.
what a great segue and an introduction to our guest,
Yeah.
Mr. Cole Shiflet. Everybody,
Yes, sir.
thank you for coming by,
Thanks for
my
having
brother.
me.
Man, I've heard a lot about you, and you've been a guest name that has popped up several times, and I'm glad we could finally get it worked out where you're sitting on the chair, brother.
Yeah, man. I always get happy when I see whoever y'all's guest is, and it's been a few of them, the people that I know really well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, welcome to the family, dude. Welcome to
Thank
the
you.
brick walls, my brother.
So where did the name come from? I was curious.
Well, it couldn't be. We were gonna use some different ones.
Man,
We couldn't use some words because we would get canceled before. Like moron we were going to use other words that in our time was okay to use, but
So-
we can't use these days.
I'm a normie.
I'm even more intrigued.
I'm a normie. I can drink
Yeah.
and be okay. I think I told you I tried GHB a couple times, multiple other drugs. Just nothing ever stuck with me. I just never really liked it. So
So I guess you're the moron.
I'm the moron in this, right? Like I don't understand. I'm getting better at it now after doing this, but watching him struggle, I had the same questions that probably a lot of his family members, a lot of people that loved him were around him. Why don't you just fucking stop? You know, like, but we have similar sense of humors. We thought it'd be a good thing to kind of bring very crude. We thought it'd be a good idea to talk about addiction and recovery from both of the standpoints, right? Because you either are an addict or you love someone who is, but either way, if enough time passes, even if you're not in recovery or in addiction, you're going to be affected by it in some form.
Some degree of it.
Yeah,
sure.
some degree, right? So I'm in here to be the blissful, ignorant guy asking the questions of,
Well, you'll know a lot more than most.
Yeah.
Doing shit like this enough.
Well, there used to be three of us, so it was two addicts, moron, and now it's one addict, moron, and now you're the second one.
Two addicts.
It's
Yeah.
still two addicts and a moron.
so we kept it rolling that way. Yeah.
That's
So,
tight.
So
yeah.
all of our guests is the other addict these days.
Yeah. So
Everybody in recovery that you've had on?
well, just about.
Yeah.
We had the director on, Andrew Chabet.
From Sean's movie, the one that directed
Okay,
Sean's
yeah.
movie.
Yeah, I Am Livingston, or Sean Livingston from I Am Redemption. He was one of our guests, and we had the director of that movie on, which
Isn't an addict.
he's not an addict or a fucking moron. Like if you're making movies like that, like so, yeah, we'll probably branch out a little bit, but I think outside of him, everybody else has been in addiction and in recovery.
We're gonna have my therapist on here soon. She needs to come on talk
Yeah.
about the psychological part of
Who's
where
your therapist?
her name's Evelyn. I don't know her last name.
I know her as ET.
Yeah,
Last name starts with a T. So we call her ET.
Might
But
get her to put Joey under a trance during the episode.
I'd be in. But yeah,
EDMR or something like that.
yeah, she does hypnosis.
She does hypnosis.
Yeah, so maybe I can get her to hypnotize me.
Should anything that betters yourself.
Yeah, whatever. I'll give it a shot. But thanks for coming by, brother.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me, man.
So,
Good way to spend a Sunday evening.
Yeah, man. How long have you been in recovery?
My sober date is July 25th of 2006.
Okay, man, that's big. That's a long fucking time.
So
Yeah, dude, we're
coming
creeping
up
up
on 19.
Yeah, well, we'll just call it coming up on 20 because you're closer to that than the other side. So
I remember seeing my mentor pick up a 20-year chip, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I was like, that is so long.
Yeah.
And so it's surreal kind of being right there on the cusp of it yourself. You're like, because I've now been sober longer than I was when I was getting fucked up.
yeah,
So it's weird. It's gone by in a blink, and so much has happened since July 25th of 2006.
yeah, man. Well, so you were in the fight for a long time. What was your DOC?
Well, GHB was my favorite.
Yeah.
But it was primarily, like alcohol and cocaine. I couldn't imagine doing one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
I got started late, but immediately kind of went from 0 to 100. I was not, brought up in a family with alcohol or addiction issues and all that. There was distant family, like uncles and all that shit that, had some issues with it, but it was just never a thing. So I didn't start drinking until I was 16, and I only started that because I really craved a social life, because I was just kind of a loner. I wanted friends, but I wasn't good at talking to people and all that. So, I was the dude that was sitting by themselves, at the lunch table. And that shit's hard, when you're at that age, and all you want to do is like be cool and you're the furthest thing from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then I kind of fell into a group of friends. And the first night that I ever drank, it was, I can't remember what the name of the wine coolers were, but they came in, 4-pack bottles. And I drank all 4 of them and blacked out drunk. Next day, woke up with my first hangover ever, and it was intense. But, what was kind of true to form on it was I was just like, I can't wait to do that again.
yeah,
Because people the next day, at school were like, man, you were crazy. That was awesome.
Yeah.
So you're finally
High-fiving
just
you
kind of
and
getting
shit.
this like, wow, there's something to it. And so then it's hard to drink every day when you're in high school. It was a weekend thing.
yeah,
But what started off as that, I was like, okay, this is great. So I bet smoking weed is great. I bet ecstasy is great. I bet da-da-da-da-da. And before I knew it, like, it's crazy now. Like, I have a 16 and 17-year-old. And when I was either 18 or 19, I'd already shot heroin. I'd already smoked crack and all that. And it's just like looking back, like at my kids, I'm like way too young to be doing that dumb shit.
Yeah.
But everything kind of revolved around social circles, and who we hung out with. And, I worked downtown for a good bit, and pretty much everything was in this hunt to try to just be as cool as possible.
yeah,
I look back now, I'm like, man, what a douchebag.
Yeah.
It was just like the furthest thing, from cool, but it felt like it at a time. But I had a problem with it from the jump.
yeah,
I had a lot of good times on it, but the party was over by the time I was about 23, 24. That's when legal consequences kept adding up, just really started to struggle with depression from it. And I knew that, it had its fangs in me pretty deep, but I didn't know anything really about addiction despite being in rehab because it was always mandated or parents want you there. It was never voluntary,
right,
and all that. And so, the habit was really bad. But the thing that really twisted me up the most was I was watching my mind, and it was like, why can't I just leave this stuff alone? And like how the book talks about being restless, irritable, and discontent, I started just feeling that more and more and more. And so I really started to wonder what was wrong with me mentally.
Yeah.
And all I knew was that, hey, this is getting worse as time goes on. And eventually, you start having like suicidal ideations and whatnot because the pain kind of supersedes your will to live. It's not that
Right.
you want to kill yourself. It's just like, this is already, bad enough. And I know based on my experience, it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah.
And so they were always two different things in my mind. It's like, yes, I have a problem with this, but my mind seems to be a lot more, of the problem. Of course, come to find out when I really started learning about recovery, the steps and all that, of course, they're tightly interwoven on it. But
Yeah, that's the thing, especially when we were growing up. Like, we didn't hear about fucking addiction. Like, I was watching a movie the other day, or yesterday. It was from 1994. And in there, one of the actors was like, well, you went to drug and alcohol therapy, right? Or you went to a rehab facility. And she's like, it's a treatment facility. And she was like embarrassed and fucking, because it was something that people didn't do back then.
yeah, it was almost taboo kind of.
Yeah, like if you went, it was like you said, either the judge sent you or fucking someone sent you. It wasn't that you went on your own, and it's definitely, it's nothing people talked about. Like, it was embarrassing,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh yeah, my son is in rehab. Like, you hear that so much now. Well, back then it was like, oh shit, like parents didn't even want to say that.
I think it still is.
You think?
I do.
It could be, it's just, it's tough when you've been in recovery and surrounded by treatment for so long, especially when it was part of like your work. It very well may be, but I'm just so detached from,
Right.
how normal people kind of view things just because it's
Second nature for you.
it's just my life.
Right.
And has been for a long time.
Well, I think the open forums and discussion is becoming better about it, right? Which is going to make it better. We're doing a podcast on it, right? But I have a family member that had zero idea that he was struggling with alcohol, and I can only imagine that it had something to do with with his parents being a little embarrassed about it, right? And I think that probably just still goes on today. I mean, I see a lot of people
That
like
part
you guys.
absolutely does.
Right.
Without a doubt.
Right.
I do agree that like the stigma is not what it once was. I don't think. And I don't think it's just because I'm inundated in, the not normal, kind of crowd, like when it comes to treatment and recovery and all that. But I think the opioid epidemic, really opened up a lot of people's eyes to it. And then, of course, with the introduction of fentanyl and, the lives that have been lost and all that, I do think it's more of an issue that's up close to people than it once was.
Yeah.
But I think there
that's fair.
absolutely is that shame, like element to where, you have these families and they're so sheltered from it. And you got your all-star child and, could never, be their reality. And God forbid, anybody know, if you have problems within your family, especially when they're in, in that regard. It's just, so it is still looked down upon, I think. Without a doubt.
For sure.
Did you see a lot of that when you ran Solstice, right? You pretty much own Solstice, right? That was,
Well, you don't own a nonprofit.
Okay.
But
and how long
yes.
did you run Solstice?
Parisi was part of the formation of that place. Did he talk about that when
He did.
was on here?
He talked about that a little bit on here.
Yeah, and so it didn't last long with me, Frank, and another friend of ours named Eric. It probably only lasted about 3 months before it blew the fuck up. And Frankie and Eric were gone, and I had to figure out a way to make it stay in existence. And the only way to do that was to turn it to a nonprofit so we could immediately get some cash flow in just to, be sustained. But with Eric and Frank, out of the picture, then it was just me and my wife. Brought her into it, also. So, we ran the place, from a governing standpoint.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, that's the rehab that I went to, was Solstice. And I tell people all the time, like, that place saved my life. Like, it was the perfect rehab for me to go to.
Had you been in any previously?
I'd never been anywhere before. That was my first one. Yeah. But I was also in a different place in my life where I know most people go to many rehabs. When I went, I knew that I had to stop. I was going to lose my daughter. And I knew that it was going to be really hard, but I had the mindset that I was done with using.
You were brought to your knees.
Yeah, I was definitely at my rock bottom, you know.
Who was the common link between you and Solstice?
Brody. So Brody Lafitte knew Mike.
Finnegan?
No.
Presley?
No. Hold on. New York Mike. What's his name?
Tasso?
Tasso. Him and Tasso used to shoot dope together. And so Brody worked with us, and Brody knew about Solstice. And I came into work one day, and he was like, hey, like, I was already like 13 days sober, and I was getting to that point. I could always get like a week or two sober, but once that depression started kicking in, that was where I would always go back to, I got to use, because I can't handle what my mind is going through. And but Brody knew Tasso, and he's like, you know what, you need to go to rehab, and I'm going to pay for it. So he called Tasso. Y'all gave me a partial scholarship, and then he paid the rest, and that's how I got to Solstice.
That's crazy, because that place wasn't in its infancy. The place was never meant for like people that were first timers in rehab, because it was. I'd worked in a lot of treatment centers, you know, prior to that. And when I started working on admissions, there was a phone call that is so common, and that is, I don't need to go back to treatment. I just need to get to a safe place. And how many people, the amount of calls that people say that is mind-boggling. And so the idea was just to create a place that was for the retreads that had been there, done that, to where you have a good idea about the steps and everything else, but either you can't afford to go back to rehab, or if you just don't want to, because when going to get help becomes a roadblock to you getting better, that's not good. You know, especially when the stakes are so high these days because of the opioid epidemic and fentanyl. And so it was just meant to be a retreat place where people can be in a safe environment, you know, around people in recovery. And, you know, always wanted it to be a place that was enjoyable to do it. Yeah. Because rehab is pretty much not enjoyable. You can look, in hindsight, you can look back and you can be like, I had some good times.
I fucking loved it.
You know, and that was the idea, was just like, hey, we want guys that, you know, when they get out of there, they're like, I feel great and I just had a badass time. Yeah. That was the niche, you know, and we were very adamant about the fact that we didn't advertise ourselves as a treatment center, because when you talk about treatment centers, you know, you're talking about clinical services, you know, and all these other things, because you can actually get in trouble, you know, from DHS and doing that. Yeah. So we were a retreat center. Yeah. But we obviously had a lot of people that had never been in any kind of rehab, because most of the time it was because they didn't have the resources available or the insurance. And so we wanted to be able to help them. But yeah, ideally our target audience was always people like myself that had been to. Yeah. You know, and
Mike Presley had told Brody, he's like, you know, we normally don't, first timers normally don't come here. And Brody was like, trust me, he's a worse boy. He belongs over there. So yeah, that's how they got me in there. And I went the next day, and it was, I remember when I got there.
Was that like 2018?
No, that was 20. What's my no. January 1st, 2022 is when I got sober. So I went January 13th, 2022.
It's weird. Like in my mind, I still think that we shut that thing down in 2020, but no, it was 2022. Yeah, it was later in the year. Yeah. Because
but yeah, when I went there, I remember I was like 30 days. I didn't want to go. It's like 30. So I had on the back of my notepad, I had 30 days wrote out, and I was just marking the days down. And I remember after like day 3, I stopped marking them because I just enjoyed being there. Like I was like, well, I'm going to be here. I'm not even going to mark the days down anymore. And it was like to me, it was the perfect place for someone to go to.
And we believed in terms of like people that had never been into rehab. We believed that it could be very beneficial because we kind of believed in the core principles of it, which is you know, we're going to work the steps. We're going to have that recovery aspect, but we very much believed in the value of the fellowship. Personally, I don't think the fellowship of, you know, recovery is given nearly enough credit as it is. But it's, if you're with people that you enjoy being around, like your boys and all that, and then you throw in the fact that like y'all are just laughing, cutting it up, and just, you know, like guy humor, just, you know, cutting each other's balls off and all that, then it just makes it to where it's so much more easy to do.
Well, and
if
there's
it's something
zero
that
judgment.
sucks, I mean, if it's something that sucks, if you're like me, you're not going to do it. You know, it's like
Right.
it just ain't happening. Maybe do it for a little bit, but you know, eventually I'm going to be like,
place,
you know, fuck this. There's really no reward to it, and you start to kind of miss out on. You can forget about all the bad shit, and you can kind of miss out on that other stuff. And so we really want to put a high premium on that enjoyment aspect of it.
Yeah.
I would kind of always like draw it up to, you know, that analogy of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it.
Right.
So I think the key to that is how do you get a horse to drink the water? You make it something that he wants to drink, you know, and so make recovery something to where it's coveted as opposed to, you know, I don't want nothing to do with that.
Well, to your point, it's like the fellowship, in my view, is kind of everything, because you just said it. You're 16 years old. You're sitting at a table alone, right? That's isolation. That's getting. What are you having to do to get pulled into those to those crews that you want to be a part of, to be the cool guy, right? And that's incredibly negative, and that's what puts a lot of people into addiction.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the adverse of that is kind of what you're saying, that fellowship part of it, which I've never been around a community of people that are so together and have maybe never met each other. But because you're here with me, you are one of me, and we are in this together. Right. I've never seen it. I've never seen anything like it.
Here's a great example of it, just coincidentally. So I knew I was cutting it kind of close on time, getting here at 5, but I gave myself an extra 5 minutes because I was going to stop at Summer Moon to get a coffee.
Yeah.
And so I always go to the app, recent orders, order again. That way it's there. You know, I can just pick it up and go. And so I park, and on the way in, there's this lady sitting at a 2-top table. She's by herself. And she's got one of those big books, you know, big print. And she's also got an Awakenings workbook with it, which in the Awakenings workbook is this crazy detailed breakdown, everything in the big book and all that. And I saw it on the way in. I was like, I would bet a lot that that's a big book in an Awakenings packet. And then on the way out, because her back was to the door, I saw it again. And I just passed by. I was like, great book, great workbook. She was like, you know about this? I was like, yeah, very much. I introduced myself. She introduced herself. And we talked for a couple of minutes, and it was just like, I have no idea what she does, anything about her story, but there was immediately just this like connection in there. And we talked like we'd known each other for a long time. The only thing that I think is kind of like that fellowship aspect of people in recovery, I would think would be vets, you know?
Right.
Where it's just like, I bet
That's a great.
That's a great analogy.
I bet that, you know, vets, they could, you know, as soon as they meet another vet, especially if they're in the same division. You know,
the lingo changes, like
then you're
everything
just tired,
about
and
it.
you're very comfortable talking about like some really nasty shit that, you know, you would not otherwise be talking about with people that hadn't been there and all that. And that's very much the case when it comes to recovery. Yeah. It's just like immediately, it's just like you can remove all filters.
Yeah.
You know, and you know that person gets you, you get them, and vice versa. And you start off at a wonderful place that could otherwise take years to bypass all the bullshit, you know, the small talk, to where you get to know somebody intimately.
That's a great example.
Yeah, it's a great example. And even for someone like myself now, who's been doing this for a little while, I'm the normie of the crew, right? And an example from just this last weekend, I have an addiction, and it's baseball cards. I buy baseball cards like fucking crazy. Like, it's a problem. So I stop off at the card shop, and there's a kid in there, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy this kid some cards. I just was going to do it. I was like, pointed him out and identified him. And then I see his mom and she's like, podcast, or I brought up the podcast, or she goes, what's it about? I go, well, it's addiction and recovery. And she's like, well, I'm X amount of years in. And then I've heard of your podcast. I've had friends that have been on the podcast, and she just immediately like started opening up to me, and she didn't know if I was a moron or the addict. Right. So she was just like, how long have you been in? I was like, not my deal. But she kept talking and talking and talking. It was a really cool moment to be like let in on that, where she felt judgment free. Yeah. She could just open up and talk about it. So,
and that kind of goes back to what you were talking about in terms of it is such a common issue to where people, whether if you're, an addict, alcoholic, or not, but because it has affected pretty much every family, in some way, to when, you're talking about it, you already have a common link, even though you're not in recovery, but she is. But because of what you do,
right.
Your knowledge base of it, and doing something like this, you could talk to that person forever.
So you want to hear something crazy? I'm not trying to interrupt you, but this is how small this world is. We went and fellowshipped after a meeting. We went to Heroines Anonymous on a Friday night, Dark Side of the Spoon. We went and played pickleball afterwards because that's what we do to fellowship. The girl that you're talking about, her sponsee was at the pickleball.
Yeah.
And she said, moron, just met my mentor and my sponsor today, and she's coming on your podcast.
No, well, she's hadn't committed yet. I asked her to.
Yeah, okay.
After she had you could tell it was one heck of a story there. And I just kind of brought it up. I was like, well, would you like to come on? And she was like, oh, no. So...
Yeah, I met her sponsee, and she's like, I think my sponsor's coming on y'all's podcast.
Yeah, we got some work to do on her, but I think it'll end up happening. But to that point, though, before Mike, me before Mike, I don't know that I would have been able to have that same interaction with that person. Could have had the same intention of buying the kid the cards and all of that, but I should, if it got brought up in some way or some form, I might have been like, oh, sorry to hear about that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So again, it's like being open-minded, being upfront. The shame doesn't need to be there. It's part of your story, part of what got you here today, and just fucking fellowship, right? Like,
it's pretty cool because people like yourself, don't identify as an addict alcoholic, but because of this, like, you're accepted in the crew.
Yeah. That's, and Sean Livingston tells me that all the time. He's like, yeah, dude, you're one of us, man. He's like, there ain't shit we're going to tell you that's going to offend you or take you back.
Yeah. And that's exactly what people mean, when, they talk about, someone that's a normal person. You're like, yeah, he's one of us. And it just is that, kind of cutthroat sense of humor, just fucked off, kind of smoked upstairs a little bit. Yeah, and it's a compliment, where it's basically like that dude's cool as fuck.
Yeah, like, that guy gets it.
Yeah,
gets it.
So, what got you sober? Like, what was the steps that got you that brought you to your knees? The Mike moment, going to Solstice type of thing.
It was kind of what I touched on. It was, well, for one, for about the previous year, from a year before I got sober, for the first time since I was 17, I wasn't on any kind of legal papers or anything like that. So I had no, reason legally, to do it. But I entered to that depressive state to where, it was just time to go. Yeah. And I was never gonna do that because my mom, my dad, my brother, just had no desire to put them through that. But again, eventually my pain superseded it, and I was crying a lot for days because I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't be in that much pain because I had enough experience by this point in terms of living in that disease to where and you talked about it, Mike. It was just like hey, whether if I was high or not, I was actually, life was easier when I was high in terms of like internally. But once, the alcohol, the drugs was removed, I mean, I was just a basket case, you know, I mean, it was just painful, you know,
Yeah.
and so of course, you know, I'm going to self-medicate that. And so I was having suicidal ideations. I'd already been in treatment a whole lot of times. And I told my parents, you know, that, you know, I would never ask them for anything kind of again, because, you know, they spent a lot of money on, you know, getting my ass to rehab and all that. But I called my mom and, she wanted to meet me at a coffee shop in the mall, and I gave her all the crack and coke that I had in my pocket, and I was like, I'm in bad shape, and I need help. It was the first time that I ever asked for help for myself. It was the first time that I ever wanted to go to rehab for myself.
Right.
And I think that's a huge deal. You know, it's like I really don't know how you make someone do something that they absolutely don't want to do.
Yeah.
You know, I think you got to have a lot of skin in the game to do it. And so, and that's also when you talk to families a lot, that is a question that comes up, which was like, hey, what was different for you this time around? And yeah, there were a lot of things different, but my stock answer is that I wanted it more than anything, and I wanted it for myself.
Yeah.
And so I entered into treatment the last time, and that's where I met one Frankie Parisi. And what's crazy about it also was that, you know, I'm born and raised in Austin, and I winded up getting sober the last place you would think. I got sober, you know, in Austin, in my hometown, because you know, here in Austin, I had all my friends. I knew all the wrong people. And so it was so hard previously when I was trying to get sober. Every once in a while, I'd go in AA, you know, I'd be able to put like a month or so together. But I didn't know anybody in the rooms. And I didn't make any effort to get to know anybody,
Right.
you know, either. And it was so easy to fall back in, you know, the crowd. But because I went to rehab here in town, and the rehab center that I went to is called Mark Houston Recovery. It had just opened up. Like I was the fourth client there, you know, and Frankie was the third, second, or whatever, you know, he was there. And the guy that ran the place, who I'd known for a long time, his name was Mark Houston. He's a big deal in the AA world. You know, very sought after speaker, best teacher in terms of, you know, the big book that I've ever met, you know, without question. He lived in the house with us. And so we just had this tight group. You know, we had a lot of fun. When I got done with my 90 days there, Mark came up to me. He's like, hey, we're growing in census. How would you like a job as a tech working here? And I was just like, you know, you want to pay me $9 an hour to drive a van and hang out, you know, with these dudes? You know, I was like, I'm in.
Yeah.
And so for the first time in my life, I felt proud to tell people what I was doing, because I was always ashamed to tell people, you know, what I was doing in the past, which is, hey, I had no higher education whatsoever. And, you know, I worked at a car wash, you know, and did mobile detailing and all that. But from a ego kind of perspective, when I would say, you know, especially because I was 30 years old, when you say like I'm working at a car wash, to me, it just felt embarrassing, like low, you know,
Right.
which is stupid, you know, but again, the ego's kind of real.
Right.
But when I had that job, even though I wasn't making shit, you know,
Right.
I felt such pride in
proud
telling
of that.
people, you know, I work at a treatment center,
Yeah.
you know, and so in doing that, when you work in treatment, you get to know a whole lot of people. And then my girlfriend, my now wife, when I was maybe 6 months sober, she got pregnant, you know, with our first kid. And so I'm loving what I'm doing for work, but now I got a kid on the way, and I did not want to be that dad,
Right.
you know, and so the stakes got a lot higher. And for me, it was a really good thing, because all it did was further push me in to make sure that I did what I needed to do, you know, in terms of making sure that I stay okay. But man, I mean, I was set up in a real good place, because I was working at a treatment center. Everybody that I knew in recovery, you know, was the people that I hung around with. My work was surrounded in recovery, so it was always right there on the forefront. But I was still so scared because all I knew was that I was a chronic relapser.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to do this for a while, but I'm going to fuck it up. It's a matter of time before I fuck this up. And that really scared me based on my experience, because I even had a year and a half sober at one point, but for 13 months of it, I was institutionalized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, it was scary. But I did what I had to do to take care of myself. And then not long after that, bada bing, she's pregnant again with our other kid.
Yeah.
And, we married. We're still married. We've been together since we were 15 years old.
Yeah.
A long time. And it was just like the stars lined up, for me. So I was able to make a career out of working in recovery. It was very good to me, and I loved it. But everything was kind of different. I wanted to do it for myself. And I did things that I'd never did before in recovery in terms of like the amends process. When I would get sober prior to that, I was able to make kind of the chicken shit amends, like mom, dad, and the ones that are like 1 degree away from you, easy ones. But I would never make these tough ones, or ones that, I don't know, I just didn't have that willingness. But I engaged in that process in terms of, the book talks about cleaning up the wreckage of your past. And it takes a long time to do that.
Yeah.
But I did it, and I stayed very consistent in the service work aspect in terms of like going to hospitals, sharing the stories, to go to those H&I meetings. So when people talk about like, you hear it a lot when they're like, if they're picking up a chip for a milestone, you commonly hear like, I had nothing to do with it. It was all God. And I get what they're saying, but in my mind, I'm like, no, man. I was like, you have to do your part.
For sure.
Recovery is absolutely earned.
Yeah.
You have to do it. Then he does the rest. It's just like going to the gym. It's like you have to, there's no getting around it really. You got to put in the time and the effort to do it. You earn it. And I very much think that it's true in recovery. So I did what I had to do, to get it.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel comfortable until, in terms of like, started to lose this fear of I was going to relapse until I was probably about 2 years sober. And that's when, I was like, you know what, if I just keep doing, what has got me this far, I might just make it. I just might be all right. And then time just went by real fast. Before you know it, you got 5 years sober. That was a big one for me. 10 years was a big one for me. And they're all big to where it's just like, I can't believe this, because all you want, at least all I wanted when I was messed up, was like, I just want a normal, boring life, to where I'm just not stricken by this mental pain and dealing with all the shit, that I did. But it was such a distant reality. It was a dream, a wife, kids, career, anything like that. It was just never going to happen.
Being happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, then all of a sudden you find yourself to where it's like, you feel like you're in a dream. It's like, how did this happen? How did those dreams become a reality? And when I really think about it, even to like this day, I can get choked up.
Yeah.
I have these moments to where, because I'm still in my head, all day, just about one thing or the other, to where I wish I was present more than I am. But when you have those moments of like, you're watching your kids do something, or you're watching your kid compete, with my daughter recently, it's like watching her kind of really get invested in a relationship. And you're just really just floored. You're just like, this is incredible. And I owe it all to recovery.
For sure.
Without a doubt. Everything falls under that. Without that piece, who knows where I'd be today. It wouldn't be pretty, if at all.
Well, dude, that's awesome. I mean, having 20 years in, having that 2 year, I guess, itch, you know, I mean, it seems like kind of normal for a lot of people. They start getting that feeling of like, all right, what now? And then things just kind of start falling into place. Yeah. And embracing that fellowship, that process, using the people around you always seems to get them out of it. I
again, the stakes these days are a lot different than they were when I got sober because fentanyl wasn't around. You know, like doing heroin was ungodly taboo.
Crazy.
Back then. It was just like you can do all the coke in the world and all that. But that shit,
Yeah.
is just
I was
like,
the same way.
That's a problem.
When someone's shooting heroin, I'm like, oh, you're terrible.
Yeah, you're like not a good
Yeah.
person.
As you're
You
pulling
are
out your
really
meth
As I'm
at the
smoking my
bottom,
meth over here.
of it. And of course, there is no difference, but in your mind it is. But I mean, it was just a non-issue, in doing it. And so and we know too many people that have passed away, from this. Yeah. And back when I got sober and before that, it was very rare that someone died. If they did, it was most of the time it was from, a car wreck. Like me and Lucas lost one of our closest friends in '98, and another good friend was in the car with them.
He still talks about him all the time.
Oh, dude, it was terrible. Just hauling ass on a road actually right there by Solstice. And what the stink of it is, Clint, right? Jester?
Sure.
So his girlfriend's sister was having a black tie wedding at Barton Creek Hotel. And so you had to wear a tuxedo. You had to go. And Brandon and our buddy Mark were supposed to be there with us, but they didn't get their tuxedo in time. And I remember that night because the fog was crazy. And Brandon had a Mustang that was way too fast, for his own good.
Yeah.
And they were coming back from what was then Southwest, now it's Texas State. They were coming back and they were driving like morons down Ranch Road 12, which is a nasty road. They lost control and they hit a tree going like $130.
Oof.
And they were supposed to be there with us, that night.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I really, had to deal with kind of loss. And his mom and her husband are just two of my favorite people. The mom wanted us to see Brandon in an open casket. And that was brutal because the only way that I could recognize him was by his eyebrows. The only way the family was able to identify their son Mark was by his feet and his calves. And so, but that's how someone would die back then. Now the people that that we know that we have lost is just it is. When they say epidemic, I mean, it really is, an epidemic. So, the stakes are a lot higher. And I get real worried when people are coming in recovery because you can be on fire, for a little bit. But eventually, you kind of settle into life.
Life happens.
And you start dealing with some life shit.
Yeah.
And I've heard it talked about to where they say it's called like the second surrender. To where, like around 5 to 10 years sober, you can start to go Looney Tunes, to when you really are faced again with, some, kind of mental demons to where it gets real hard. And you have to be able to sustain, those hard times. And it's scary because it can go on for a long time. And so from the outside, having kind of been there, it's getting sober is hard enough,
right.
And if you can reach that first year, that's a huge one. But you also know you're like, man, you still got, the ups and downs that are unavoidable,
right.
With life. And it's, can you stay consistent, and do these things? Because there is nothing you can do to keep the bottom from falling out. It's going to happen in one way, or another. But can you do what you need to do to sustain that until you get on the other side of it?
How hard is it this will be a question for both of you, but like to fight the complacency of being strong in your recovery? Like what I mean is, like you just said, right? Like you can 5-10 years, you can start to feel Looney Tunes. Do you think that comes from being like, oh, I'm good. I've got 5 years in now. I've managed probably some ups and downs in that 5 years. I'm just good. And you're complacent. And then you stop kind of.
I don't know. It's a good question. Possibly. Mark, again, going back to Mark Houston, who this guy practiced what he preached. He was 20 some odd years sober and he was still very disciplined in terms of his recovery kind of practices. But he did start to get a little lax. And when he was 10 years sober, he went full on bonkers, And what it did was, and this is where the word second surrender came in. it got him to where it became less about the motions of recovery and pushed him more into like, hey, I got to seek God, on this to find this contentment that has completely escaped me, somehow. And so I do think that's a big piece of it. I also just think that it's unavoidable because it's for anybody in this room, life is going to happen. It's going to be great, then it's going to be freaking brutal.
Yeah.
It can happen like that. Whether if it's by an event or just because you start to lose your head a little bit.
Yeah. I have Matthew, one of our favorite viewers. He messaged me today and he asked me kind of a similar question. He said, what do you do when like the depression kicks in? Right. Because I used to always think like, man, if I can just get sober, life's going to be so much better.
Yeah.
Right. And that's definitely like, it is until shit starts happening. And then you realize shit's still going to happen. Right. But now I've always dealt with it before where I'm just going to get high. Well, now I can't get high. So now I got to like really buckle down and deal with it. So what I told him was, I know I'm a little over 3 years sober. And on my worst days, I know like, and I tell you at work all the time, I need to catch a meeting tonight. Like I can feel I'm not spiritually there and I need to catch a meeting or I need to go talk to God or I need to talk to Jesus. I need to talk to somebody. And that's what I always do is I was in a meeting Friday night and this guy said something that made so much sense. He said, there's so many miracles that God puts in our place, but we don't see them because we're not looking for them. Right. And he said, he made an analogy and it was amazing. He said, if I asked you on the way from your house to this meeting tonight, how many red cars did you see on the way here? You'd say, fuck, I don't know. But if I said, hey, when you leave the meeting on your way home, count up how many red cars you see and then text me when you get there and tell me. You'll be able to tell me exactly how many red cars because you're actually looking for them.
Yeah.
He said, so when I'm not looking for the miracles God puts in front of me, I don't see them. But if I just keep my eyes open for them, I can find them. I can find them in every situation, even the bad situations. I can find them. And that's what I would say is I think when I start getting away from my fellowship and my program and like just being grateful and when I start not talking to God as much, I think I can definitely start falling in that little trap to where I know like, man, I'm not spiritually fit right now. I need to go get spiritually fit.
That's one thing that really bothers me about myself is to when I can feel bad about myself or feel like, have these days or, where I'm feeling like the victim. Because if you look at my life externally, it's a freaking joke.
Yeah.
Okay. I got a wife that I'm crazy about. I got 2 awesome kids, got a house, got cars. It's just like, it doesn't get much sweeter, but I can still, at times, be like, oh gosh, just like, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough. And I'm aware of that kind of internal dialogue and it drives me crazy because it's just like, I know what a bad day is.
Yeah.
This ain't it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the good things that comes from like recovery and doing the step works is you have a lot of awareness, on things. Like one of the best things that like recovery, one of the tools of recovery that has served me so well is like the 4th column inventory work in terms of, I don't like the way it feels when I can blame somebody else for any situation. For some reason, I can take it a lot better when I'm looking at what part I had to play in it. And sometimes I didn't have a part in it. And sometimes it's just like, hey, who am I to judge this person based on the things that I did? I'm able to kind of like defuse it. And so I have this awareness when I fall into those spots of poor me, and it genuinely bothers me, because I'm just like, you entitled, selfish little shit.
Yeah. My fiance the other day, she told me kind of the same thing what you were just saying. She Destiny was like, I don't know why sometimes you're in such a shitty mood and you have such an amazing life. And I had to sit there and I had to say, you know what? Why am I fucking angry sometimes? Like, she's right. Like, the worst thing that can happen to me in a day, I can't even tell you these days. I could tell you 3.5 years ago what the worst thing that can happen to me quickly.
Yeah.
And I could tell you probably 20 of those things that can happen. Boom, boom, bang, bang, bang. But today it's like, what's the worst thing that would happen? I don't know. It's not nothing bad, nothing I can't handle, unless I lose a relative or something, right?
Sure.
But that's something that I've went through that during my recovery, and I know I can get through that too, right?
And that's when I think you gain confidence the longer that you've been sober, because you've had to test your mettle, in terms of like
100%.
dealing with life stuff. And once you get through the hard times, and then more of those hard times, then you start to believe, in yourself a little bit. Like, you know what, the shoe's going to drop. Sooner or later it's going to happen again.
Right.
But it's going to suck. But I know I can get through it.
Yeah.
But I had to earn that confidence in terms of I had to be in the ring,
Right.
going through it.
It's scary too because they're coming.
Yeah.
And it's like, fuck, how am I going to handle that?
Yeah.
Right. I call them cookie jar memories.
I like that.
It's little memories that I can go back and pull out of my little cookie jar and say, well, I've been here before. I've done this before. I've had to go through this before. Right. And I can get through it again.
Yeah. As soon as I can turn my focus into more of a gratitude thing.
Yeah.
Just the smallest things. Like I love when my kids call me dad.
Yeah.
Just those little things.
Yeah.
It's like,
No, that's a great that's a great thing to think about.
I just don't want to take, I get mad when I take those things for granted.
Right.
And again, I just want to kick my own ass sometimes because, again, it was all such a distant dream. At one point, I got these kids and they're like, hey, Dad, you want to watch Landman tonight? I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I'm in, because when I leave here, that's what me and my son are going to do. Because, even though I've already seen it, he started watching it. And so, before I left, he was like, hey, episode of Landman tonight? I'm like, absolutely.
Hell
Yeah, man.
I need to get, even like presently, I need to get more in gratitude. And this is one of the cool things about like just talking about things, like with you guys is I just got goosebumps.
Dude, me too.
I'm reminding myself of all the things that I should be grateful for. And I need to shift my focus more on it because like right now, like we're going through it kind of financially because, I'm a roofing contractor now, which in itself is crazy. It's just
Right.
like this. I never thought that this would happen, but I made a conscious choice to get away from recovery after doing it for a while. And the money's good when it's good, but when it's not storming and all that, it gets pretty lean. And so when it gets lean, I get stressed. And one of the best things, is just like talking to you guys. Yes, I have some life stresses going on, which again, everybody goes through. It's unavoidable. But if I focus on things like my wife and my kids, and the reality, the volume of that stuff gets so turned down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just in talking about it, it's raised my awareness more of, again, I'm the luckiest fuck alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cool thing about it is that, because again, like before I got sober, I would have traded my life for anybody else's in the world because I was in that much pain. She was like, I don't care, anybody but mine. And when you get to a place to where the opposite is true, it's like, I wouldn't trade my life for anybody. It's profound.
That's a profound thing.
Yeah. And so I need to have better awareness of it because, like you were talking about, you can get complacent.
Yeah.
In things.
Well, I'm going to use that dad one. Probably make me cry the next time one of my kids calls me dad.
When Kaylin calls me Dada, because that's what she's called me since she was little. But I was always using then, so I took it for granted. But when she doesn't call me Dada often anymore. But when she does, almost make me cry right now. When she says Dada, it's one of those heartstrings that she pulls.
It is.
Especially when she's like, she'll hear me say something, and your kids probably do this too, yours too. She'll hear me say something that's important to me, but it's really not important to her. She could give two shits. But down the road, she'll repeat it back to me so she knows that, Dad, it was important to me. I was listening. She'll say, right, Dada? And I'm like, yeah, baby, that's right.
Yeah.
It's an amazing feeling, and it's something I took for granted for the first 6 years of her life. That it's like what you said. Now I get to really be present, and I get to really enjoy it, and I get to just be grateful from it.
And the coolest part, like again, like having some time under my belt and from working in rehab and the people that I've gotten to know and gotten close to, that there is nothing cooler than when you see other people's life go the directions that yours did, in terms of like, you get to see some, like, to see you sitting here doing a podcast, on recovery, and you being aware of these things, you're so happy, you know.
Right.
Well, you had a big part of that.
These people. I gave you a platform.
Yeah.
Again, going back to, you did what you had to do to do it.
Yeah.
Like the other night, there was a bunch of us that went out to Perry's. It was John Schrei, Presley, Matt Linenberger, and some other guys that were, and all of us are worst boys. And, I've got a lot more time than anybody in there. And I've seen every one of those guys at their worst, to when they were just at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
And then fast forward, you're sitting at a table and everybody at that table has time. Two of the guys, Charlie and Mike, there recently, had kids. And it's just like, you see these people to where, they had nothing. They were in a terrible spot. And now you see their lives just getting big. And we're all just sitting there. We had a blast, just cracking up. But I'm sitting back and I'm kind of watching, everything, because I've seen every one of those guys at the worst. And you're just so happy for people.
Yeah.
It's the coolest.
Yeah.
Like when the book talks about it's an experience that you must not miss.
Yeah.
Well, they're not wrong.
Yeah. It's amazing, some of the things. So, like the promises the book tells you, like how they come true, as long as you keep doing what you're supposed to do. And I say that same thing, like when you see people when they first come in the rooms, because I always try to make friends with as many people as I possibly can. I definitely introduce myself to most everybody. And when you see people at 10 days, right? And then you see them at their 2-month chip, or their 6-month chip, or their 1 chip, like the growth that they have is fucking, like, it's priceless. And when you, especially in the position that you were in, when you have a piece in that, you had skin in the game to where you gave people a platform, even though you don't want to take credit for all it, but you gave them a place, and you had a bigger part in that than what you probably think that you do or what you want to give yourself credit for. And when you get to see that, and as many people as you got to help, that's something that there's no drug that can ever give you that high of a feeling than watching people come from here and get to there and know that I had a little bit of a part in that.
One of this buddy of mine that he's a worst boy also. He made a post the other day, and I was thinking about it. He's one of my favorite stories. His name's JJ Gomez. This dude, he was alcoholic. And he called late at night, to try to get in because he didn't have the, resources. And he was blitz drunk. And I still have the voicemail that he left, just because I love it. He's so drunk. And, the voicemail's like, hey, sorry, we can't take your call. Leave a message, And so his message was, he's like, message? You want me to leave a message? I need help. Fuck you. He was such a dick. But the next day when I listened to that message, I loved it.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm calling this guy back. I called him back, and I told him that because I was just like, I got your message. Yeah. And I was like, I loved it. He was like, man, I'm sorry. I was blitz drunk. And I was like, no, man, that's like, let's get you in here.
Yeah.
And so fast forward, watching him, his kids, and he has built a business to where he is doing very well, financially. And so you get to see these stories on, on a grand scale.
Yeah.
When you're like in a position that I was in, or really anybody kind of, working in recovery. And thank God for those, because we see a lot of tragic, stuff all, as well. And you get to see it in a big volume from being, in that world. So I really miss the interaction with the guys on that scale, and seeing all these crazy stories. I certainly don't miss the other side of it, as well.
That's what I wanted to ask you is, when you were working in recovery and with Solstice, you see a lot of great stories, but you also see a lot of people that don't make it, right?
Yeah.
And in the beginning, and towards the end, did that always affect you the same? Especially when we lose people, right? Because unfortunately, I always tell people the longer that you're in recovery, you're going to lose more and more people, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
It's just
math.
unavoidable. It's just what it is. And I know I've talked to some people to where it doesn't become normal for them, I wouldn't say,
It becomes familiar.
but it becomes familiar.
Yeah.
And is that kind of the same with you? Like in the beginning, did it affect you more or did it always affect you the same?
It affected me more in the beginning. And I don't say that, like in a calloused, way. But yeah, just because you're not that familiar, kind of with loss. And so, yeah, it affects you at a deeper level. As time goes on and more tragedies, more loss, it's like you do become more familiar, with it. And there's sometimes I've lost a lot of people that were, my best friends and, that I met through the rooms and you wish that you could cry more, for it, but it's just not there. You still feel the loss, you still miss them, the same, but you don't kind of have the emotional response. I started to get so flat kind of in that regard that I didn't like it because I wanted to be able to access that
Right.
more because I knew that it bothered me. It's just you learn to compartmentalize it and kind of shove it down. And so I checked myself in a week program in this amazing place in Kentucky. It's a dual diagnosis, it's been around forever, very coveted place to where they deal with dual diagnosis clients, primarily heavy on the mental health side. But they offer it's either a 5 or 7 day, I think it's 7 day. They offer a 7-day track for people that work in recovery to where, and they don't practically charge anything just for you to get away, for you to go through this crazy body of work to clinically whatever you're dealing with. And for me, I went up there because I wanted to unearth, this stuff. And they opened me up fast. And it was me and I want to say 5 other people, small groups, that are in there. And I was the only dude in there. It was all girls. I cried more than anybody in there.
Yeah.
And I'm still reaping the benefits, of doing it. But yeah, it's just, you stuff it down and it does affect you. For me, it affected me more that of how flat that I got.
Yeah.
And so it's like, when you think of let's say paramedics, I can't wrap my mind around the shit that they see.
Yeah.
Firemen.
People burned up in, their cars, their house, just unfathomable stuff. And it's like, but for them, I'm sure it gets familiar, but there's no way it doesn't affect you, which is why most of those fields you're required to do certain things to make sure you take care of yourself, like therapists and all that, because it'll jam you up one way or the other. It will. But for me, it was, you I started to kind of feel like a sociopath, basically, or psychopath, whatever you want to call it, because you're like, you just had a very dear loss.
Yeah.
You just lost your boy. And it's just like, I should feel it more than I am. What's wrong with me?
Right.
For not feeling it. But it's just because of repetition, it becomes way too familiar.
Yeah.
Like at Solstice, the amount of, just from that facility, the amount of people that we lost, through there is probably around 100.
Wow.
A lot, because we got the worst of the worst that were in there. High acuity, most of them, I would say 80% of the people that went in were heroin, fentanyl addicts, all IV. And so you're going to deal with a lot of loss because of the shit that they're fucking with on it. And so, and it seems like everybody that passed was just one of those people that was just salt of the earth in terms of, just a worse boy to the core. They just had this beautiful, attractive gift, where just you enjoyed their company so much. They made you laugh, so much. We lost people that, were on the team, behind that stuff. And so, you're dealing with some very close losses. But it did affect me enough to where that was one of the big reasons why I was ready to do something different. And so
Right.
I'm still able to experience some of that, when, someone reaches out or I'm able to provide assistance, in one way, because I always want to be able to have, I never want to, rob myself of that, experience.
You got to have a foot in the door,
doing
man.
it. Yeah, it is. I mean, that's part of my recovery, and in doing it. I just don't do it at the scale, that I once did. And who knows what's down the road? Like, I'll probably wind up doing something again, one day, because even now, again, you're a roofing contractor. You're not in, recovery. It's two very different things. And I still feel like a sellout.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I really felt like that God put me where He put me in recovery to help him. I promised God, I was like, man, if you do me this solid, like help me out in my life, I will spend the rest of my life serving you. I distinctly remember that prayer, and I've never forgot it. And so, and again, it's like I still feel like, am I turning my back on it? And when I'm looking at it, kind of logically, it's like, no, you're not. But I still can't help the way that I feel, about it.
Yeah.
Look, man, I'll tell you, like, you're out here right now, sharing your story, and to me, you're not turning your back on it at all. Just because
That's
you're
one reason why I wanted to do this. I wanted to be a part of it, because just I think you guys are on to something, like just with the backdrop, like you guys, have here, and just y'all's raw as well as kind of comical approach to things. I think that it could really, really do well. But I also knew that, because it always proves true, that one thing that I know is that when I leave here, I'm going to be in a much better mood.
yeah.
Goosebumps again. The music's going to sound a little better, and that spills over to when I go home. I'm going to be a better husband. I'm going to be a better father, because I'm going to be so wide awake to this gift of a life, this joke of a life that I get to, live these days. And so I never want to deprive myself of that, but I just have to combat that selfish side of me, to where it's just like, oh, I don't have time, for that. It's like you fight the very thing that is the best medicine, in the world, but it never fails to be true. It's like, I will piss and moan sometimes if somebody asks me to do something, like, oh God, because they're inconveniencing you. Because again, I'm very selfish, at the core, but it has never not once been the case to when I left there. It's like, man, thank God that I did that, because
for sure.
you see things 20/20 again, as opposed to living up here all day. It's like you have a couple different sets of eyes. You have your eyes right here, and you have your eyes that are in your head. And I'm constantly looking out, it's like my eyes are open, but I'm in la la land.
Yeah.
It's like you drive somewhere and you have no idea what you saw or anything, because you're always just in your head. But in doing anything that's like service oriented or engaging with other people in recovery, then you start to see out your eyes again, and your mind is, the volume on it's turned down. And you just feel so much better, because this has been and always will be the source of the problems.
Yeah.
Is my mind. It is just geared to fuck me one way, or the other. And there's no way I'm going to be able to detach this thing, although you wish you could. It's just you wish you could just
insane.
Throw it away, because it just robs you, of so much. And there is nothing that I've ever found that gets me seeing out of my eyes, more than when you do something like this, or when you help, somebody else.
Well, look, brother, we've had 50 something odd episodes now.
That's wild.
And I'm just going to go ahead and say it right now, but you played a part in this.
Yeah.
I mean, you really did.
Huge part.
It's me and Frankie have actually talked about this, a good bit, because, we've known each other for a while. And it's like, had I never met Frank, then my life probably wouldn't look the way that it does, and vice versa. And it all started with a phone call. The phone call was because, again, I was in this place called Burning Tree, and it was a big time behavior mod place. I mean, you could not have your feet on tables. You could not be in your room during the day at all. I mean, it was like doing time.
Yeah.
Like a
And
big
that was
book,
the-
like Big Book all day.
I mean, big book, clinical,
Yeah, yeah.
and all that. I mean, it was accountability to say the least on it. And you can't do that shit anymore that they did there because of like state regs. But it was hard. And it was also because of that, it was just like, I'm never going back to, rehab again. And Mark Houston was the executive director of that place. And so I got to know Mark through there. And when I got to the place where I needed help, I was reached out to Mark and I was going to ask him for a scholarship to go back to that very place, knowing that I was going to be gone for a year, knowing I was going to an ass kicker of a place. But he answered the phone and he's like, it's weird that you called. I just opened up a treatment center right here in your hometown. I was like, get the fuck out of here. I'm on my way. Without that phone call,
Right.
I don't go to that place. I don't meet those people. And it's just like who knows what my life would look like had I not made that one phone call.
Yeah.
Without that phone call, you and me aren't sitting here. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, when you boil it down to just how a moment in time changes everything, not only for you, but for other people,
for all the
as
people on the wall.
Without that phone call, there would never be a solstice. There would never be this, that, and a million other like different things. And you can really trip out when you start thinking about that. You're like, wow, because it was a moment in time that had really no significance in itself at that time, but changed everything for you. And not only that, did so much for so many other people.
100%.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
thinking
So
about this.
when I hear you say that you've turned your back on anything in the recovery community and sold out, look at that brick wall, dude.
Yeah, there's some gangsters.
There's some names on that wall, man. And
Yeah.
had you not been there for him when he came through, then that brick wall doesn't have those names on it. I mean,
And I get it because Mark, he winded up passing away from a stomach aneurysm, but like it was Mark Houston. There was another one of my guys there. He has since passed. His name was Tony Messbarger, and this other therapist named like Robert Bowles. And whenever I see them or saw them, I would always thank them, just be like, and I would tell them, and I meant it, be like, man, you guys, y'all saved my life, And I mean, just because they were there at the beginning. I look at Parisi and the other guys I was there. It's just like all these guys play such a huge part in my life. And, without them, I don't have these kids.
Right.
Well, you helped save my life.
That. And so I get, like how that works. But again, it's crazy when you go back to where like things really started from.
Yeah.
And where everything started from in this regard was just over a 5-minute phone call in 2006.
small moments, right?
Yeah.
But you helped save my life, brother. Whether you want to take that credit or not.
I don't.
We have somebody that works with us that was in Solstice with me. Evan. Remember Evan?
Fuck yeah, I remember Evan.
Evan works with us. I got him a job with us. He just got engaged. He just paid off all his probation. And he's over 2 years sober. Evan's fucking doing great, man. Evan's...
I mean, you get so happy.
Yeah.
I mean, Evan had been to Solstice a few times.
Just heard about this thing. Yeah,
Right?
I think like 3.
Yeah. You know what's funny is when when I got out of Solstice, Evan got out like 2 weeks before me, right? And I was about 2 months sober, and I get a phone call from Evan. It's like, hey, man, I hate to call you, but I ain't got no one else to call. Can you send me $20? He had relapsed already. He said, can you send me $20? I said, for what? He's like, I just need some crack. And I said, fuck? I said, bro, like, you want me to come give it to you? He's like, no, you can cash up. I don't want you to drive to me because then I might try to get you. I don't want to bring you in this. So I was like, let me call you right back. So I called Mickey. Remember Mickey?
Mickey Fallon?
Yeah, Mickey was with us. So Mickey had just got out too.
Love that.
I called Mickey and I'm like, hey, Evan just called me for $20. What should I do? He said, yeah, I already sent him $20 this morning. Go ahead and send it to him. He's going back to Solstice tomorrow anyways. He's already talked to Cole. They're bringing him back. Just let him get high one more time.
I did that. I did that so much for so many people. It's like, and of course you're told don't ever give somebody because you're just going to wind up getting them high. But because you've been there, you're like, you know what? If I'm going to give him money, knowing damn well where it's going.
Yeah.
But if it serves as kind of a bridge to help, means to an end to get him there, it's just like, the pros outweigh the cons on it. But, and I also loved it because, I don't know, people that that I was around, they knew that I was easy to talk to because I would never ring somebody up, and just just judge them or talk down to them. I'm kind of the opposite because I just like being eye to eye with people.
Right.
And so, but because of that, people don't hold back. They would not try to bullshit me, just be like, I need to get high.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm like, yeah, man, I got you. The only time when I wouldn't do it was when it became a big pattern. To where it's just like, I'm not helping this person. In fact, probably otherwise to it. But
well, it's awesome that you when you mention someone's name to you, you even remember their last names, right? You don't. I don't know if you realize how big in this community your name really is. Like I know when Mickey went to court, he was talking about he was going away for a minute, and he said, and Cole walked in and it saved me. He said Cole walked in and the judge was like, "Fucking Cole Shiflet, fucking come back to my chambers, come talk to me." And whatever you went back and talked to him about kept Mickey from fucking going to prison.
And that's I remember that vividly. It was those things to where, you're just overcome with this, where life, you're just like, what is going on with my life? Because, you go from being someone that frequents being in the courtroom to fast forward, you have a judge asking you to go to chambers because they want your, opinion on it. Like, it stopped at COVID, but prior to that, for about 10 years before that, I had what's called authorized access at the jails in Texas, which meant that I could go in and I could get face to face with an inmate with the same privileges that a lawyer would have or someone like that. Like no plexiglass, you get to go in there with them. And every time I'd walk out of there, it's just like, how did this?
Yeah, you're just looking around. You're like, what the fuck?
You're seeing when you signed the wall when you was on the other side, and now you know.
But like the judges, I think they always liked me just because I didn't bullshit. It's like they get gamed and lied to, all the time. And I would just tell them, straight up, like, hey, yes, this guy's got a history. We've been here before, done it again. But from what I'm hearing, like, it'd be cool. This guy has another chance. And I would also like tell him, like, you know as well as I do, Judge, like, if this is going to work out or not. But I think it's kind of worth the risk. And it was really cool to when they would consider that, and especially like when it worked out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was surreal. But I mean, when I started working in recovery, there was 2 treatment centers in Austin at that time. Now you can't count, how many they are.
Dude, that's insane.
It's insane. But I was able to get known, more than other people, mainly when I started the Last Resort, because, your position does get elevated to when, you're a founder and a director of a facility, you get more visibility, you just do. And then, go into Solstice kind of after that, you got more visibility. And the cool thing was that like, everybody knew that I was completely fucked off, in my mind. It's like I've always kind of been me. Don't try to play like anything else. But people knew that my heart was always kind of in the right spot, on it. So, but because of the way that I interacted with people, which is like how we're interacting on there, I think I got more visibility than most people. And then Solstice was huge just because of the amount of guys that we helped that didn't have like any money and all that. So it was really cool how upheld Solstice was, which was just like so many professionals advocated for us just because it's like, hey, these guys are filling a huge void.
Yeah.
Especially when like Austin Recovery shut down because of COVID, there was no other spot to where people could go get help that didn't have resources. And that's one thing I think that is part of the guilt is that now there's no spot, in Austin.
Yeah.
To where if you do go to a state-funded facility, you have to walk through so much tape to get there, and it takes so long, you know, and you're going to a place that a lot of times is it's hard to get well in because these centers, they deal with very little resources, you know, when they're a nonprofit on there, but they do the best that they can. And so I don't like that there's not a place like Solstice.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
you know,
I
anymore.
went, I tell people all the time, like, the place that I went was the perfect place for me. I don't know that if it would have worked if I would have went to one of these other places, but when I went there, it was the most at home I felt in such a long time, and the first time that I could just be me without having to get high. Like, you know, I'm a different person
And be
when I'm
embraced
high.
because of you
And be
being
embraced
who you really are.
and be
you
around.
know?
Like, I couldn't have picked another group of 11 guys that, like, if you would have said pick 11 guys, I would have picked the 11 that I was with. Like,
Who else was in your community?
you had Evan, you had Mickey, you had Ashton. Me and Ashton, he's getting married. Did you know that? He's doing well. I had Grant, Grant Robertson. He just reached out to me. He wants to come on the podcast.
I see him on Facebook.
He had went through some struggles, but he's getting back into it. And he's like, man, I would love to come on. I just talked to Patrick the other day. Patrick's not doing great.
Which Patrick?
Is it Willis? Patrick
Willis, yeah.
Patrick Willis.
He's a stud, and that dude's got a story that is
Man, when he's
mind-boggling,
on, he
brother.
was my sponsor for a while.
mind-boggling.
When he is on his shit, he is fucking great.
And he's such a good dude.
Such a good dude. That's the thing that people don't realize is all of these, most people that I've ever done drugs with are fucking great people when they're sober.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are great people even when they're using. But man, when they get sober, if they can turn that fucking switch and turn that corner of, you know, that hustle mentality that we have when we're trying to get high, if we can put that into doing everyday life shit and going to get something like this podcast, like, you can achieve some amazing fucking things if you can just turn that into something positive.
Say that was
Mickey was there. Love Mickey. Seth,
such a stud.
you know, remember Seth?
Seth's doing, from what
Fucking
I hear,
love
Seth is
Seth.
doing. I love Seth. Like you were saying, like these guys are just salt of the freaking earth.
Like,
man.
I've
Like,
got fucking really, like, lifetime friends and
you had
brothers
some
from
characters
there,
in your
dude.
community.
And then your text that you had there, fucking Tasso. I love Tasso.
I love Tasso. I miss
Tasso
that
was
dude,
there.
man.
Fucking Clint was there. Braven got there after. He had been there before, and he got there after.
I'm so happy for that dude.
Yeah, he's doing great.
I mean, that's just a perfect example of, you know, sober. He's lost all his weight. You know, he's a dad umpteen times. you know,
Yeah.
like over now. And, you know, I got to see him, you know, to when, like, you know, he was bad. And I really worried about him just never believing in himself that he could possibly do it.
Yeah.
But there was so much, like, behind Solstice. Things were done for a reason. You know, that it was very much calculated. Like, I knew, don't know, but I felt strongly that because of the way that we went about things in terms of, I believe in the power of laughter. I believe in the power of the guys, the boys. I really feel strongly that if you can give people an experience to where, you know, they're in recovery and they're laughing a lot. They love the guys, and knowing that the relapse rates are, you know, crazy as they are. But I wanted them to have a point of reference to be like, I felt that way before. I had a great time with these guys. I want to do it again. Again, I wanted something to be coveted, you know, to come back in, just in hopes that it makes it easier for that individual to give it another shot as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah.
And so, like,
The boats will rise together, right?
exactly.
Like, I mean,
but there were so many, again, everything there was for a reason. And a lot of it is, you know, people would say is ass backwards, but I absolutely believed in, you know, the way we went about things.
Yeah.
Very different.
Johnny
It was
texted me
very
the other
cool.
day. Johnny still reaches out.
He's a character.
He's a fucking man. That guy.
He was number one, dude. He was our first client.
Johnny is still to this day one of the smartest people I've ever had a conversation with.
Wicked smart.
And it makes me feel uncomfortable. He was my sponsor too, and it makes me feel uncomfortable because it's like when Joe Rogan talks to Elon Musk and he says he makes you feel like how not smart you are. Johnny can make me feel that way.
Yeah.
Because Johnny's just like fucking psychologically, he's on a different level.
He is.
Yeah.
You know,
And the way that he breaks shit down and looks at the whole picture,
you can't teach it.
it's uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, you can't teach what someone with a mind like he has when it's applied to breaking down things and all that. He was fun to watch, and doing it because again I got a lot more experience than Johnny.
Yeah.
A lot. It's just a fact. But when he's doing a group and he's on, I'm just watching him like, just you're kind of in awe. You're like, boy, that boy's good.
Yeah. He's good, really
He's
good.
good.
And then
But
OG
also, I think
Joey. Remember OG Joey?
which one? Krause?
Yes. Yeah, I like Joe. Well, you had Joey that was the tech.
Yeah.
And then OG Joey. What's Joey's? I don't know his last name.
Oh God, I hate it when I can't put someone's face to it. Joey Watson.
Yes, there you go. We had to bleep that out. We had to bleep it out.
I hate to have to say that for me to be like, oh yeah.
Yes. You know what's funny is I worked with a girl that texted me the other day, and I'll tell you the name after this. She's like, "Hey, your friend Joey, fucking give him my number. He's a fucking hottie." And I was like, "Well, unfortunately for you, he's not going to be interested at all." And she's like, "Why?" And I told her, and she's like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" I was like, "No."
They get all the good ones.
He does not he does not like women. He likes boys, which is fine, whatever. And she was like fucking heartbroken. She was like, "This is fucking terrible. This is why I don't go after." She was all pissed.
Joey was a scary one, man, because I mean, just hopeless alcoholic, and he would go through some rough, mental stuff, but it's just like they're still around.
Yeah.
Little things like that. Like you see someone's name or you see their picture, it's
Yeah,
man. But
cool.
look at the net you've cast, though, dude. Like, I mean, just
that's
watching
just in 1 month for me.
Yeah, just watching your face when he's bringing up these people, man, is like it's a really beautiful thing to watch. So
I appreciate it, but I mean, these are beautiful people, man. It's
dude. There's so many beautiful people in this. Like, I mean, I think that's the point, right? Is like, let's go find more of these people because they're out there and they're just in dark places and they need to be.
So that was the coolest thing about being in a spot like me and Tara, we're in, or really anybody that works in, is that you're crazy exposed in terms of volume of the people that you get to see. Like, it's just not the community that you go through. You see countless communities of these guys. And again, like, man, I can't think of a dude, through all these years that I've met to where it was just like, man, that's a bad dude.
Yeah.
It's just like these guys are awesome. But, you get to experience people and how good they really are, through your interactions in terms of like, I don't expect people to tell me their, things that are very uncomfortable to talk about. But if I can make it easy on them by me talking about my stuff and me exposing my shit, and you make it very easy for somebody to open up that is very closed off.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you get to see these people for who they really are. And man, I miss that a lot.
Little Tyler, you remember Tyler?
Which one?
Fucking, I have to look his last name up. We had 2 Tylers. He's still sober, and he's just as long as I am. So whenever we were there, he was the one that nobody thought was going to stay sober. Like, there ain't no fucking way. He was from Corpus. His dad ran a construction company up there, and he
Ooh, I'm close.
all of his teeth. He's got all of his teeth redone now. He's got beautiful teeth. He had fucking terrible teeth when he was at Solstice. He got all his teeth redone. Good looking dude. Was a good looking dude. He just had bad teeth. But he's been sober for over 3 years. He's working. He runs a forklift in fucking like. He does construct. He works like 70 hours a week. Works his ass off. Fucking when he comes into town, he'll call me and say, "Let's go catch a meeting." And he was not in so when we was at Solstice, we had chores that we had to do, right? You had to fucking I hadn't done chores in fucking forever. So we had to wake up and do chores. He could only ever sweep because his arm was fucked up because he shot dope in his arm and it fucked his wrist up. So he said it was bullshit. It was fucking bullshit because y'all took us to climb at Bolden at where's the place we go climb?
Remember Acosta took y'all there.
Yeah,
I
we
think.
went and climbed like mountain climb, but it's
Yeah.
rock climb indoor. And this little motherfucker could climb all the fucking hardest shit. And we were like, bro, what's up with your wrist? So after that, he was back on chores because there was no more fucking. He would be outside blowing the leaves because that was the only thing he could do because his wrist was hurt. But then this motherfucker's climbing all the hardest of the hard. He could climb everything. So yeah, we had to put him back on chore duty after that. He couldn't there was no more leaf blowing.
Things like that I love. I can't tell you how many guys that was on chores and you see him just standing there with the broom, like they got a big mic on stage. They're not doing anything.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there with the broom, you know, and
Yeah.
looking. It's just like, I know what you're doing, but I'm not even mad at you to watch this because this is great to watch.
Yeah, it was fun, dude. It was we had one.
It was.
We had one. We couldn't have our phones.
Yeah.
So we had one porn magazine, right? That was stashed off somewhere.
I bet that shit was gross, bro.
What was the older guy that passed away? Used to work for Dell.
Tony Musbarger.
Tony. So
That's one of the guys I was talking about in terms of like who I owe so much to.
Yeah. So Tony big book, fucking knew it all, right? Knew it all. When Tony left, he took the fucking porn magazine with him, and he left one page, right? There was one page. That one page went from fucking room to room to room. Like, it was so bad. It was like someone's taking a shower, and they're like, hey, who's got page 69? And someone would have to go get it from their room and bring it to the bathroom for that person because that was the only page that he left us.
Man.
Only page he left. Fucking
Dude,
the one
Tony,
page.
That was a tough one for me.
Yeah.
It was a very weird one as well because I give Tony all the credit in the world for saving my life.
Yeah.
You know, and he's the one that really mentored me in terms of like how to do admissions and so much.
Yeah.
And I put him on a high pedestal. It was very weird when you go from when the script is flipped.
Yeah.
You know, to when all of a sudden one of your heroes, you know, is, you know, in your
needing
care.
help.
I didn't like the way that felt, you know, just because it's like, that's my guy. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I put you, you know, far above me, but of course, you know, because he was there multiple times and I would say yes to him every time just because I love that man to death. But that one broke my fucking heart, dude.
You know what's crazy? So he bought Tyler's truck, little Tyler. He had bought a new truck, and Tony bought his old Ford, and he had wrecked it. So we had helped him change the fucking panels on it, right? We bought the panels, me and Tyler and him. He was staying at Tasso, where Tasso's Sober Living was. He was staying. Was it Tasso's? No, it was someone else's. It was the other guys.
Probably Charlie Moffitt.
So who?
Charlie and Joe.
Amit had two sober homes. He was staying at one of them. And Tyler was there. Ashton was there. Well, we helped him change his panels. And then he was like, yeah, I'm going to San Antonio to make 3 amends this weekend. And Tyler was like, that's not a good idea, Tony.
I remember this.
You shouldn't do that. He said, why don't I go with you? And I'll go with you. And you can do 1 amends, and then we're going to come home. And he said, no, I'm going to make all 3 this weekend. I'm good. And then that was when all that went
I think
down.
if I remember right, one of those was with a girl that he had sexual relations with in the past. That winded up kind of, you know, didn't go according to plan.
Yeah.
Then after that, he wound up in California, wound up in a bad way out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weird. I remember him going down to San Antonio
Yeah. So
to do that. But yeah, that was my guy. That guy was a Dellionaire. You know, when Dell, you know, he was high up the food chain when Dell was just in the beginning of its growth. Big house, you know, boats, jet skis, and
Corvettes.
all that.
He said he had everything.
Yeah.
And he was doing crack, right?
Yeah.
Started
Then
doing
he
crack.
wound up in the penitentiary, had a spiritual experience in there. And then after that, he started working in treatment. But Tony was, again, I emulated a lot of things that I did after Tony, which was you never felt uncomfortable talking to this guy because he never judged.
He never judged, and he told you straight up.
Yeah, and he, you know, he would just laugh at things that are unlaughable because only someone like Tony, you know, you find the humor in these, you know, tragic things,
Right.
you know, that we do. And again, that's one of the beautiful things about fellow people in recovery is you laugh at these real dark moments, you know, in our time. And there's a lot of healing in that. But Tony was a crazy example of that. But
Yeah.
I never did not tell Tony how I felt about him. And I'm glad that I did that,
Yeah.
you know, because he didn't like hearing it, you know, either.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think we got another one in the books.
For sure.
What a great fucking episode,
You have
man.
to
What a
tell the-
great
You have to
full-
tell the Cub story next time.
What a great full circle.
I can't believe you know that.
Well, here's the thing is you're going to come back. Like
we need
you're
to do
coming
an
back.
episode with some Solstice boys from when I was in, and bring you back on like a
That'd
reunion.
be a 5-hour episode.
We can break it up. We can do it. But I tell this to everybody. I know you're not, you know, technically working in recovery anymore, but you still are working in recovery because we're here sitting here doing this thing and you played a part in it. And because of that, the door's always open to you. And,
Hey, man, anything I can do to help.
and,
This was fun.
you were definitely coming back. And, if you ever need us for anything, we'll come running. So,
Likewise.
all right. So it was real nice to meet you. Thanks for helping my boy out and giving him the platform to get these walls built, man. So
Did I tell you that the people that bought Solstice that are living there now, that they sent me a picture of what you wrote on the wall in there?
you draw a dick on the wall.
No. You said you wrote in pencil on the wall like, this place saved my life. It'll save yours too if you let it. They
Send me a picture of it.
I sent you a picture of it, right?
No, you haven't. Send it to me.
I will.
Yeah.
Because the people that bought it, they sent it to me.
Oh, really?
And they started researching Solstice, and they were like, hey, apparently this place, you know, helped a lot of people and was really held in high regard. And they invited me to come back out there when they're done kind of remodeling it. And I'm absolutely going to take them up on it, you know, but yeah.
Yeah, send
your
that to
writing
me.
is still on the wall.
So, you know what's crazy is who's the family that is in ministry in Pittsburgh? Who's
The Fisserize.
yes, they've reached out to us and want to come on. Whenever they come to Austin, they're going to come on probably this summer.
You probably never got to meet Joe.
I never got to, but what they're doing is amazing, and they want to come on. They seen Braven's episode. They'll watch your episode. And they reached out to us and they was like, hey, whenever we come to Austin, we would love to come on because they still are telling his story and paying it forward.
He's one of those guys that was, you know, one of my best friends.
Yeah.
I had to call his parents and deliver that news. It was fucking awful.
Yeah.
But I mean, that dude was hysterical. You know, so many of these guys, like Joe's just like, they never once brought anything to your life other than just things that were amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just laugh your balls off
Yeah.
every time you're with them. And, you know, you hate to say that there's some good that comes out of someone's death because, you know, all you do is miss that person. But what Chico and her husband have done is, you know, and they don't stop.
And they're in it
on
together.
a fucking mission.
They're on a
man.
fucking mission. It's awesome.
And we're excited about them. Like
Yeah.
we're
Should
like
be.
for sure. So when they come back on, if you'd be so kind as to come sit and maybe take a peek at it and
Yeah.
check it out. I'd love to have you guys all in the room together.
It is tragic that you guys didn't get the opportunity for Joe to be here.
Yeah.
You know what's
This
crazy is I told them I'd never met him, but his name in those walls at Solstice was revered. Like fucking his name was mentioned all the time.
He's one of those guys you will never forget if you meet him once.
Yeah.
Just huge personality.
Yeah.
He was awesome. That's pretty cool. Y'all are getting them on here.
Yeah.
So they're flying down. To
They're
do
coming.
this?
They're coming.
Well, they're going to come see their grandkid also.
yeah,
So
they're gonna. They said they'll be in Austin this summer, and they would love to come on. And yeah, it's like fucking come on.
Yeah.
bring it.
amazing people.
Can't wait. Well, you're welcome back anytime, brother.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
guys.
you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. And
Thank you for all that you did for me.
how do
you.
people find you?
I kind of live under a rock these days, but I'm still on Facebook.
Okay.
You know, I haven't made a post in so long. You know, I need to get back.
Well, I have a feeling you're going to get reached out to a little bit here. I have a feeling.
Yeah, we'll tag
So,
you on our Facebook,
yeah.
Instagram. Give me your TikTok.
I'll get my son to teach me how to share that shit on like Instagram and all
There you
that.
go.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm stupid when it comes to social media.
Bro,
There-
me too.
likewise.
We're literally still.
We're literally
just
like
learning.
just now trying to figure that out. Like, so
Apparently
Sean
that's-
Livingston
that's how
just
you
lit
do
our
it.
ass. He said, "Y'all are doing yourself such an injustice." So he's trying to teach us some
Parisi's
shit.
no joke either when it comes to like knowing how.
Oh,
to,
yeah.
you
He
know,
reached out to me last week. He
utilize
wants to
social
come
media.
back on.
Yeah.
He's like, "Man, tell me when y'all want me back on. I'd love to come back on."
he won't shut up about his story.
no, no. He's still out there, and it doesn't get old either. So we'd love to have him back on.
I saw him right before he was going to have that transplant in the hospital,
Oof.
and that was hard because I thought I was saying goodbye to one of my boys.
Yeah.
You know, and just see, I don't know.
And you clearly were not.
Yeah, no.
That dude's not going anywhere anytime soon. But thank you a million times over.
Thank you for coming on, brother. Yeah. Two Addicts and a Moron. Peace. We're out.
We're out of here.